So in what may be the biggest silly season shock since Nico Rosberg's retirement, Daniel Ricciardo was the first domino to fall in what could be the silly season we've been waiting for the last 3 years. Let's try and break down this hot mess. I'm really not that surprised Daniel Ricciardo's heading to Renault. He's always talked about wanting a bigger challenge, and Renault's now the factory of the most to gain in the field right now. Oh, and 20 million a year doesn't hurt either. And anyone with half a brain cell or knowledge of how Red Bull operate will tell you that it was always going to be Verstappen's team eventually. Horner claiming Ricciardo might be scared off by him, as well as not even taking his threat to leave seriously, kinda says it all. Renault with a team of Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg, who's done nothing but great work since joining, is a formidable team, and with a bit more spending to bridge the gap, they might just be looking at podiums soon. Ferrari are in a pickle, having to choose between Kimi Räikkönen, who's quietly having his best, most consistent season since returning to the Scarlet Red, and the young hotshot in Charles Leclerc, who's been excellent for Sauber. Personally, I'm leaning towards giving Kimi one more year. For the first time in a while, Ferrari have a winning formula, and are in contention for both championships. Not so sure now's the time to break up a partnership that's finally working. As for Red Bull, they have a buyback option on Carlos Sainz, who's out at Renault whatever happens. Given their time together at Toro Rosso with Verstappen wasn't the most harmonious, I do genuinely think Red Bull will jump the queue yet again so Pierre Gasly gets the seat. Kinda makes you think just how much they've sacrificed for Verstappen at this point, but I've wailed on Red Bull in enough Drebriefs as it is already. Carlos is now in a pickle. McLaren's admitted he's high on the list if a seat becomes available, and that's a big if. There's still a lot of rumblings about McLaren and an IndyCar expansion. It seems to be a matter of when rather than if, and whether or not Fernando Alonso jumps ship. And it's hard not to feel sorry for Stoffel Van Dorn, who's talented, but caught between a bad car and a ridiculously good teammate where it's nearly impossible to shine. And then, as 15 people reminded us on our last video, Lawrence Stroll and his consortium bought out the Force India team to take them out of administration, which naturally has led to talk of his son going with him, and taking Esteban Ocon's seat. And I sincerely pray to God that he ends up somewhere, because it could be the second straight year where Mercs have let one of their own junior drivers slip through their fingers, after seemingly refusing to help Pascal Wehrlein out last year. I openly admit, for some of the shit I gave Red Bull for driver treatment over the years, Mercedes are quickly sliding down the same path, and with George Russell a prime contender for the Formula 2 title, they could be giving themselves a bigger headache sooner rather than later. When you combine a dumb Formula 2 champions rule that does more harm than good, and the growing trend of factories hoarding fleets of young drivers who will struggle to get on the grid, it quickly becomes a conveyor belt of talent getting chewed up and spat out, and it bottlenecks a lot of the solid talent coming through Formula 2 right now. If you're in an academy, and you're third or fourth in line, I think you could be in for a rough time. Is anyone still really confident Antonio Giovinazzi is going to make it now Charles Leclerc looks like a future superstar? Or Artem Markelov slathered in Renault gear when he drives for Russian time? How about Ollie Rowland, who looked primed for Williams last season due to being 25, with the audience tricked into believing they needed an older guy due to the Martini sponsorship? And trust me, I could dedicate an entire video alone to Brendan Hartley's awful treatment and how Red Bull's exhausted every resource they've had in the last 5 years, but that wouldn't be as fun. It seems to be that whatever happens, someone really good, like Carlos Sainz or Esteban Ocon, won't be on the grid in 2019. And it wouldn't be the first time in recent memory that's happened either. And while silly season is precisely that, and while it can be fun, it's also a stark reminder as to how screwed up the road to F1 can be.